Here is one of the most fascinating games of active defense I have ever seen. It was played in a World Championship match in 1966 between Tigran Petrosian and Boris Spassky. At this point of the match, Petrosian had a lead and Spassky needed to play some unorthodox opening, try to complicate game because he badly needed to win this game. c4, bishop g7, d4, d6, knight c3, knight d7, e4, and e6. See, regular, normal move would have been e5 in this position, getting King's Indian defense, but e6, getting a little unusual position, bishop e2, b6, white castled, bishop b7, bishop e3, and knight e7. Black is trying to get some flexible position of the pieces and a pawn structure, and does not reveal their plans in the center of what side of the board they're going to play on. After knight e7, queen c2, h6, rook a to d1, and black castled in this position, and white played d5. This is an interesting move because white is practically forcing black to play e5, getting King's Indian structure. But if you notice, it's the difference between regular King's Indian and this particular position is not in black's favor. Bishop on b7 does not really stand well because I don't know of any King's Indian with a closed center where bishop on b7 can be useful. So white played d5 in this position because if white doesn't play d5, black may try f5 and getting some kind of a pressure in the center and maybe going f4 and g5 with the chances for activity on the king side. So white played d5, black played e5, and white played queen to c1, attacking h6, pawn, king h7 is natural move, and now g3. Well, it's obvious that black must go for f5 because they don't really have any other active plan. So black went f5, white played e takes f. And this is an interesting position. Petrosian was one of the fathers of the, he was a father of a positional play. This is a very interesting decision. Now, white is letting black take gf and kind of get the central pawns on e5 and f5, but after knight to h4, followed by f4, black is going to have significant problems. Knight h4, you see black cannot play bishop f7, bishop f6 because h6 pawn hangs. So black cannot play f4 because this is a very serious positional violation, because now after bishop d3 check, you will see that white has full control on the light square diagonal, and bishop on g7 is bad, bishop on b7 is bad, and position is really difficult for black. So after long hesitation, Spassky took on f5 with a knight, but now in this position, now white played bishop d3, and black cannot start any activities on king side with a bishop on b7 totally locked out. So they played bishop c8, and after bishop c8, king g2, knight f6, and knight e4. That's what white has. White has the e4, very strong square for the knight. Now black played knight h5. Well, obviously getting two bishops advantage after knight takes e4, bishop takes e4, and knight takes e3, followed by fe, does not favor black. It clearly favors white, because black has very big weakness on g6 that white can play knight h4, queen c2. For instance, on bishop f5, they can go queen c2, continue with knight h4. Terrible bishop on g7 will remain bad to the rest of the game. Well, obviously, this bad positional mistake you don't expect on such a high level. So what happened in this game, in this position, that black played knight to h5. White played bishop d2, and black played bishop d7. Now, what black wants to do to bring the queen out, the rook out, and have all their pieces in play. White played king h1. This is a very wise move, because now white is threatening g4. Now g4 immediately, I have to point that it's not a good move, because after knight h4 check, black will have very, very dangerous attack. Knight h4, knight takes h4, queen takes h4, and white has terrible position, since if they take the knight, then simply queen h3 check, followed by queen takes d3, will put white's position in great danger. So in this position, after king h1, black has to do something about the g4 threat. So after king h1, black played knight e7, knight to h4. You see the weakness on g6 is black can feel the weakness on g6. Now bishop h3, rook g1, bishop h3, rook g1, and bishop d7. It's interesting. What would have happened? Why didn't black play queen d7? But queen d7 in this position is a bad move, because after queen d7, white has such a move as g4 that can seriously jeopardize their position. So after bishop h3 and rook g1, black played bishop d7. On bishop d7, white plays bishop e3, queen e8. Notice that knight a5 would have been disaster for black after knight takes g6, king takes g6 and g4. You see this light square diagonal from d3 and king on g6. It's disastrous for black, because white is getting their piece back and they will have a very, very strong attack. So knight f5 cannot be played. So black played queen e8, and white went rook d2 e1, and after queen f7, queen c2. Black has very, very difficult position at this point. all white's pieces aiming on a g6 pawn, and they are very well concentrated on king side. Black's position is extremely difficult. King h8, and we see after knight d2 how black tries to get counterplay out of nothing. Well, they go knight f5. This is a trick. Knight f5 is a trick. It looks like a very bad move because of knight takes g6, queen takes g6 and g4. But if this happens, then after knight g3, all of a sudden white is in trouble. Now, whether they take hg or fg, black is going to play queen takes g4 with a very strong position. And now, instead of white having attack on king side, black does. You see, they have all kinds of threats with the queen h3 or doubling rook on f5. They will have very powerful position. So, knight f5 was played, and knight takes f5, g takes f, and very strong move g4. At this point, black is in serious trouble. And that's why it's interesting that this type of position you cannot defend by playing passively. That's why I called this game very fascinating. Passively, what can you play? You cannot go here with a knight f6, because after bishop takes f5, you simply pawn down for no compensation. Move like fg is gonna lead to move like f4. I mean, is gonna lead to positional disaster. After bishop g6, and on queen f6, here is highly sophisticated positional shot. It's very unusual, but it's very unusual move, but very common idea. What white wants to do, white wants to take this knight, give this bishop, and maintain this pawn structure. In other words, having full control on light squares and totally stalemate black's bishops. But how can you do that? It's not that easy to do, because if we take the knight, black is going to take on e3 and open the f-file. That's not exactly what white has in mind. So the move is bishop takes b6. You see, white takes this pawn because they realize that they're going to get the knight on h5, and they have to maintain the same existing pawn structure on the king side and the center. And now, whatever black does, they are in very serious trouble. After h takes g, white can even play g takes h, play for direct attack on knight e4. Black's bishops are horrible and position is totally lost. So this is not acceptable alternative for black. So when white played g4, in this position, only move that makes sense is e4 for black, and that's what they did. White played g takes h, and now black comes with another very interesting way. See, a lot of times when you have bad positions, defense has to be, your best defense should be counterattack. And in this position, counterattack or any kind of unclear position will be the choice black has to make. And that's why in this position after e4. Now, taking this bishop on d3 is not going to be very good for black, because after queen takes d3, rook e8, and bishop d4, position is highly dangerous for black. The bishop is bad, and the black's king is in jeopardy, and well, the fact that black is missing a pawn is not that relevant, but this extra pawn, which is seemingly worthless pawn, will give white potentially outpost on g6. So that's not what black played, and in this position, instead of taking white's bishop, black played f4. And this is the way to kind of complicate position. Rook takes g7. It's a very, very powerful sacrifice. Queen takes g7. Now, what are the other options for white? White is going to lose their dark square bishop. That's what they want. That's what black wants. Black wants to take the dark square bishop and put the bishop on e5. That will help them defend their position. So white goes for direct attack on black's king. Rook takes g7, queen takes g7, and rook g1. And now ed move is really bad move, because white simply plays queen takes d3, and white is exchanged down, and next move bishop d4 will make black's position extremely, extremely unpleasant. Any kind of move like queen takes g1 and king takes g1 followed by fe is not going to be sufficient compensation, because queen takes e3 attacking the h6 pawn will make very, very difficult for black to defend this position. So in this position, after rook g1 for white, black played queen e5. And after queen e5, there comes another very powerful shot, knight f3. It's a brilliant attack by white, and it's very, very sophisticated defense by black. Knight f3. Now, the idea is obviously bishop d4, so taking on f3 will immediately lose for black. Now, why does white play knight f3? Because you notice that bishop on e3 is trapped. So now white kinda has to attack in order to defend their position. So knight f3, e takes f, loses at once because of bishop d2. And you see there is no defense at all against move bishop c3. Will be disaster. So it's forced for black to play e takes d. And here white makes decisive mistake. This position is won for white, and the way to win this position is to play queen takes d3, threatening bishop d4, which forces, there is no other move but bishop f5, and there is a winning continuation. This is winning continuation. Before we go with this continuation, that's how white should have played, and they would have won the game. What happened instead, white played knight takes e5, and black played d takes c, bishop d4, black played d takes e, bishop takes e5, king h7, and game ended with a perpetual check. Wherever black goes, white goes, it's a perpetual check. and game ended in a draw. Very interesting game. Now let's see the winning continuation. The winning continuation was in the position here, or queen on e5, and black just played e takes d. The winning continuation was simply queen takes d3. And you see now, black's queen is hanging. Anywhere queen goes, bishop d4 will immediately win the game. So bishop f5 is a forced move. And now white gets winning position by playing knight takes e5, which forces black to play bishop takes d3. And now bishop d4. After d takes e, bishop takes e5. Now this position is winning for white. It's almost the same check as it happen in a game, except there is no black pawn on c2. And now this is winning. It's not that easily winning, but white has big advantage. White can play rook g7 check. After king h8, rook takes c7 check. It's a typical pattern called in chess that called the windmill. Now king g8, rook g7 check. King h8, rook takes a7 check. King g8, rook g7 check. King h8. Now that white totally cleaned black's queen side, they come back with the rook on g3, check, king h7, and rook takes d3. You see that position is definitely winning for white, because they have at this point 4 pawns and a bishop for rook. And even if white plays rook takes a2, you see that pawn on b6 is very weak, and rook b3 or some move like king g2 followed by king f3, eventually white is going to have no problem winning this position. Very interesting game, because at some point both sides were under attack. And in order to keep the game going, the best defense for both sides throughout the whole game was the active defense, the counterattack. And game ended in a draw. Normally, when humans on the highest level, when they play such a tense game, it's very, very difficult to play whole game without any mistakes.